Hi everyone, welcome to the sixth lecture of our SAWSA series. Today we are very happy to have Jette Hopp with us from Snøhetta, who will talk to us about the collaboration in the design process. Thank you so much for coming and speaking to us. Just quick rules when it comes to the whole event. If you guys can please mute your mics throughout the whole lectures, just to avoid any kind of conflict of noise, and feel free to drop any questions throughout the chat box for the lecture in the chat box, as we'll have a Q&A at the end and we'll try to answer all of them. And without further ado, I'll pass to Jette.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for the kind invitation. I hope the sound is okay like that. Should we just confirm that? Okay, works well. You hear me? Good. I'm very happy to tell you a little bit about our practice today, and the topic of my talk would be with focus on collaboration, because especially within the last, I would say, 10, 20 years, and also the way we are collaborating internally, we can see that there is an increased focus on that, also in terms of the increased complexity within our field and disciplines. So I will start with this nice mountain, and actually we have snow here today in Oslo, and I'm speaking to you from our Oslo office here in Norway. And you see the mountain Snøhetta, and I think what is quite significant that we have now for over 30 years borrowed our name from a mountain. And what we say with this mountain is that this is a place that nobody is from, but everyone can go to. So I think you can already by that associate this kind of collective way of working, and also that we have this close connection to the landscape, because Snøhetta actually started as a workshop between architects and landscape architects, and then over the 30 years now we have expanded with disciplines within graphic design, product design, interior design, and art, and other associated disciplines. But still, it started with this kind of very clear relation to the landscape, and literally we are practicing that every year, not last year due to the pandemic, but we are gathering, now we are about 280 colleagues from all over the world. So I will show you later a map with all our studios, but we are together climbing that mountain Snøhetta, and at the end of the day we are discussing strategy, and well, we also discuss history, onboard new colleagues, and it's called so-called Dovre conversation, because Dovre, that is the area in Norway where the mountain Snøhetta is located. And what you see here, this is of course after having climbed the mountain, and we are, as I already told you, we are interdisciplinary practice, and I think we can see more and more practices around the world that they understand the value of having all these different disciplines in-house. And that is also that we are in a true belief that we, in order to tackle also and to maintain this holistic approach that we have in all our projects, that it's actually necessary, it's key to the success that everyone contributes accordingly. And I will show you a quick map with all our studios. It started in Oslo almost 30 years ago, or actually it started in San Francisco when we worked with our first competition, the Alexandria Library, but then the proper establishment of the studio then was in Norway. And over the years, we established then the studios all around the world. And the way we do so, it's not due to expansion strategy. It's more that since we're working globally, and when we get more and more projects in one location, like we had in New York, then in Paris and Innsbruck, then there is a breaking point there where it's not healthy or sustainable anymore that we travel back and forth. So then we followed up with the local studio establishment, and that has also to do to understand really the to get a better understanding of the context, and that has obviously to do with the cultural language, and that doesn't necessarily work always in the same way when you have this distance relationship to your project. And as we might, at least also when we speak for the first time with our clients, we are mostly known for our cultural projects. The Oslo Opera is, of course, a very important project for us, but it started with the Alexandria Library that you can see here, the second from left at the top, and then it's just a kind of a little roadmap for maybe the project that we also see in the media had got the most attention. But I think what characterize the project, that they are really contextual and content driven. They are not a result of stylistic preferences. It's really based on a deep understanding and analysis of the contextual situations. And again, it's not only in a literal way that we do a proper site analysis, it's really deep diving into the culture, the political, the social understanding of everything. And that is all informing then the project development. And then as a consequence, also then leading to these physical interpretations, so to say. So they are really having this kind of contextual reflection as a common ground. And then that's kind of independent wherever they are located around the globe. And also, as a basis for that, also it's really about people, and it's really about kind of this generosity that we have fostered within our internal collaboration, but also how we collaborate with external contributors to our project, clients, but also other colleagues that we are collaborating with. And it's about generosity, really. It's about sharing information. It's about kind of the collective ownership. And this is literally also reflected in our studio spaces. This is the Oslo office, and I'm sitting here on the mezzanine. I had to go up these stairs, and we have a mezzanine here. This is a refurbished warehouse that's located directly at the fjord here in Oslo, and I'm sitting here in one of the meeting rooms and speaking to you. And what you can see here, it's really an equal distribution of workspace, and everyone has the same square meter, independent from their position in the office or the so-called hierarchy, so to say. So an intern has the same quality of space as the founding partner. And the only rule that we have, that we switch seats every second year, and then the only guiding principle is that if you had a darker spot over 2 years, you will then guaranteed a window seat. So this is kind of the only logic applying to that distribution. And what is also quite key in all our studio spaces is this communal table, and we gather for lunch. We have a chef that prepares the meals for us, and it's about the social informal interaction, getting to know each other better, independent from the professional work. And that is also reflected in the way we organize ourselves here internally. So we are not sitting organized regarding which project the different teams are working on. It's really a free flow of information, and this is intentional because, for example, when you work on the red project and your team member is sitting in the other corner of this big open space, you have to really move through the office, and on your way, you might see something that is relevant for your own work. You will stop by colleagues. So we have actually, due to this kind of informal organization, we have a very high a level of internal knowledge that is only based really on this kind of movement that is happening all over the day. So all this kind of informal talks that you stop by, you increase curiosity, which really is key also to also not getting kind of stuck into the project team that you are working with, but you also are in constant exchange with the internal knowledge base that every single colleague represents. And maybe this is more happened more in a post-rationalizing way, in a self-observing our way of working. But during these years, we have also established a kind of vocabulary to describe our work method. And transpositioning is one of them. And that is actually describing that we are encouraging each other when we, especially in the start of a project, when we are exchanging ideas, that we are kind of invite each other to break from the professional role and switch perspectives. Also means literally that the landscape architect takes the role of the architect, and the interior of the client, the interior architect of the clients. So by this kind of free flow of thinking, we avoid narrow-minded thinking, but also we free ourselves from disciplinary conventions. I think that's quite important, at least for a short period of time. And also we build empathy for its others involved in the process. You can imagine, or what we sometimes use as a comparison is like how in some orchestra they let the musicians just swap their instruments, and by testing each other's instruments and then going back again to the more formal setting, you also increase the level of empathy, because you have a better understanding of the challenges of your teammate, and that also then fosters the more holistic approach. So we think that this is really an important part also to really think outside the box, because if you are encouraged to think also outside your kind of professional discipline limits, you will also can then have a more high level entry when starting with a project. And collaboration, it's not only about internal collaboration. I included this kind of map that shows you how we are connected. Of course, we have strong links to different academia, but also we have a lot of collaboration within research, different research formats. A lot of them are linked to sustainability research, our own research, material research project that we have, for example, within plastic or material, or we are exploring clay at the moment. So we have always ongoing research projects, but it's also that we have partnered up with some key players in the building industry, for example, when developing the Powerhouse building that I will show you later. So just to show you, this is not only about how you understand yourself, but also how you are interconnected, so to say, in order to be able to deal with all the challenges and the increased complexity that we are facing within our profession. So, of course, it's about the connection, and also the quality connection is the key to the quality per se. So that's why I think this is for you maybe also a common quote, but still it says something about the character, and that everyone has to also at least contribute to this quality, and also commit to this team spirit and to the collective ownership, and I think that's maybe something how we differentiate our practice from other, where it's more top-down driven. Here it's really in the responsibility of the team to drive the process forward. Yes, and to explain you a little bit further how we are driving the process with external collaborator and our clients, it's interesting. It's interesting how we managed kind of to link it to this research work, where actually Snøhetta was part of a 4-year research project, and we were actually the object of that research. So that was driven by a Norwegian research body called SINTEF, and they followed, I think there were 4 different professional firms, and we were the only one within the architectural field, but there was one oil finding company, and another one were lawyers who dealt with really challenging cases, and the other one worked within economy. But the objective with that research was whether there are some drivers or some conditions that are generic but that lead to innovation. And this publication documented this process, and they identified 12 drivers. And if they are kind of present, then you have a kind of the receipt for where innovation will happen. And we took 3 of them and formatted into something that we called our idea works, our concept workshop. And this, I will explain you a little bit. This is where we invite our clients and stakeholders and collaborators into our different offices. And we spend one day together with them in a very structured manner, and we are leading those processes. And this is about really exchange of ideas and speaking about the character of a project, the content. It's not necessarily about architecture or kind of the form finding process. It's really about finding something we call a conceptual springboard. So it's organized in different stages. It starts with the prepping that also includes some playful formats. As you can see here, we use a pictogram exercise, and we break out the entire team into sub-teams, subgroups, and this is about discussing what represents the project and what does not represent the project. And you have to pick some images, a limited number, and within the team you have to agree upon the images, and then you go back to the group and you present your findings to the group. And then the next step would then be you take these findings and you try to consolidate it to one term. For example, here the particle, or it could be immersive. It's something that you boil the first round of discussion down to one term, and then the next step would be to we call it getting physical, where we use our workshops that we have in all our studio spaces. We have this kind of quite extensive model workshop where we do our prototyping, but we use then these spaces where we, together with the groups and the clients, try to develop a physical format that represents the idea. So we call those conceptual springboards, and they are very abstract representation, but still throughout this day, it's getting more and more condensed, the discussion, and at the end of the day, you have a kind of an idea of the direction this could take. And also we see through this process, when you as a client and a stakeholder and also as a collaborator, and of course internally the team, when you have contributed to the birth of an idea, so to say, you want also to see this idea evolving throughout the process, and you establish something, a kind of commitment in this very beginning, and you create this kind of also collective ownership that everyone has contributed to and also then wants to see develop further. And this is really about these strong concepts that are the backbone of any project that we have. And one example is, for example, the Alexandria Library that you might have heard about, one of our very, very first projects, but this was about the microchip. At that time, the symbol of the kind of knowledge of the world, and that kind of thinking then directly informed the shape of the building, where we had this very today maybe not so technical expression facing the sea, and then we had the stone wall with all the languages of the world facing the old city center of Alexandria. Another one is a concept where we work with the visual identity of the national parks of Norway. That was mostly my colleagues from the brand design department. But that was then about the portal and how to kind of find a very simple expression that says something about the transition, that it's about, of course, being in the nature, but also protecting the nature, and that you have a clear understanding when you enter these national parks. That is about you have this shared responsibility also, of course, to protecting these vulnerable but still very beautiful spaces that belong to everyone. And the opera is also a very strong reference in that sense, where we work with a very kind of that we didn't have, of course, the clear dialogue with our clients, because that was an anonymous open competition that we won. But still, for our internal understanding and the conceptual approach for a project and task of that kind was to interpret the concept of a monument, because it was a clear statement in the competition brief that they wanted a cultural monument. And we kind of interpreted this direction more as a social monument, because it's also, when you think about Norway in a cultural sense, we are a very young cultural knowledge. I mean, all the connotation towards opera are coming from the continent. And so to bring this kind of high culture, so to say, also to kind of include and create this public ownership, we decided to make this site truly accessible to everyone, independent from the ticketing issue. So this will be opened 24 hours a day. And also, of course, when this project was curated as the winning proposal, it also, of course, required a very brave client. And this was the state of Norway who was the client, but also kind of going this journey together with us, because also, of course, there are some security issues when it comes to the roof. But they were willing to interpret the roof as a piece of art, because there were also artists involved. So that also kind of replacing it out of the pure building category, so to say. So by also what I mentioned earlier, or maybe I forgot to mention it, but when I spoke about our kind of global portfolio and this relation to our contextual and content approach, it's also based very clear on a set of Nordic values that have to do with accessibility, democracy, transparency. So this is also something like you will see all these elements in all our projects, but because we are very clearly addressing those themes in all possible manners. So for the opera, the right to roam, which is an old heritage right from the 1950s in most of the Scandinavian countries, that which would mean that you can freely move everywhere in the landscape, independent from property rights. And you only have to keep a distance of about 80 meters to a building, to a house, and you can put your tent there and you can stay there for 3 days. So it means basically that the landscape is a common ground that belongs to everyone. So we try to kind of interpret it and really transfer it into a building typology, as you can see here, the roof. And also for the opera, it was also a start of a huge long-term urban development, transferring an industrial area into a real urban development. And with the opera, that was actually for the first time in the inner city context of Oslo, where it was possible really to touch the water, because it was more, you have these kind of height differences, because it's all about the harbor situation. So here it was really about connecting the people to the water, and also then with a clear landscape references, taking it further, and also in close dialogue with the opera, the user itself, also encouraging to have the foyer as an extension of the public space on the roof. So this has also quite long opening hours, and you can freely move there as well. And also especially thinking of the Norwegian climate, the long winter season, where those interior public spaces are quite key. And I think when you look at this image, it says so clearly that you can have an opera performance inside the building, but simultaneously you can also have an open air concert on top of the roof. So you're really using the ground twice, which was for us an important fact, because it's also about it's a huge investment. I mean, and there's not always a common understanding why it makes sense to invest such a big building budget into an opera instead of in schools, education, hospitals. But actually we received quite some interesting mails years later that some opponents wrote some mails to us and stating that, well, I was really against the opera, but now I'm every day I go to the roof and eat my lunch package there. So it's really turned into a public space, an uncommercial space, and also a destination, and putting Oslo on the touristic map as well. So now to a completely different cultural context, I have included a project that we have worked for. It actually started right after the opera. It's located in Saudi Arabia. It's the King Abdullah's Center for World Culture, a competition we won. And this is kind of a very bold new initiative in Saudi Arabia, because it was all about bringing public cultural program together in one building complex. And of course, this is for a Western culture, this is not an unusual thing to do, but this was actually really the first project of that kind, because at that moment in time, there was nothing like public culture programs like cinema, theaters, museums, and so on. And I think also for us, it was also a very interesting reflection about how to, and that then when thinking about these Nordic values, how to communicate and make this happen when working in cultures that are very different from the ones that you belong to or what you're used to. So it's really about also reflecting on your own position and the dialogue. And really we thought it was, yeah, I can come to that later on, because just thinking about the aspect of collaboration again, but just to give you an idea of the context, it's really in the desert. And for us, it was also to find a typology that also reflects of this kind of very unique and first project of that kind aspect, so to say. So also find a typology that really reflects that approach. So we really had tried to deep dive in our first internal discussion on the importance of culture in society. And again, coming from this very conceptual thinking, we were discussing then and using this image for us also to understand how the different functions or the different programs are interrelated to each other, and seeing the culture as the keystone of this arch, holding everything together. And that thinking also then informed our building aesthetics, so to say, interpreting these kind of different stones coming, or formations landing in the desert, and they all had some dedicated functions related to the different components, as you can see here. And this is the built result, so it's very, very close to the first competition result. And also, when you have this very clear concept, and then it's also easy to develop all the sub-concepts, so to say. So when you have a clear understanding of the overall concept and you're then working with the facades, so you always have this kind of reference frame. It's not about just ideas coming to you. It's really about evolving and thinking of how to refine and strengthen the overall concept, but it's actually not this way. You have the very strong concept as the core of the project, and then you are kind of building up all the additional concept and form finding process related to that. I think that would be the more right way to describe it. So this was about facades, and we also worked a lot with mock-ups on that, and this is in front of our own office in Oslo. We really had this one-to-one mock-ups in front of our own working spaces. And also what is interesting, a lot of these functions, they don't require daylight because there's a theater component and a museum and so on. But we also had some situations where we had windows. So we worked then with the steel pipes that are surrounding these volumes, but we then squeezed the pipes. So the diameter then goes from circular to flat in the locations, as you can see at the left corner where we have windows behind. So these are some images from the building sites. And also we were presented, we followed the building sites, and these are two colleagues of mine. And also when you're thinking about this being a woman and really working on the building sites, which is normally a quite male dominated space, so to say. But we experienced also that within that process, and this is a mixture of my own colleagues and clients, also the client representatives, a lot of them were women, and actually they had, I think, 4 of them moving to Oslo and co-working and co-designing with us over a period, I think, when we had the heavy design phases about in a period for 3 or 4 years. They moved here with their families, and it started with that they wanted to have a cell office, but then they were so inspired of our way of working, so they ended up with a spot in our kind of office landscape, very similar to our own work situation. So it's about also what is an interesting phenomena, and finding that when you work in foreign cultures, also then that there's really a possibility of inspiring each other to the better, so to say. For in this sense, also we managed to introduce a lot of public functions. We have one entrance that is for both men and women, and also in this area, women were allowed to drive with a car. So we really strive to introduce and kind of also challenging our clients also when it comes to the to that aspect, men and women. Also we had a children's museum here, and really for us it was really an interesting journey, and I think it's a project we will never have a project of that kind anymore. And also myself, I was working on that project, and yeah, I think it was a very, very steep learning curve, but it's also such a rich and fruitful process. And another project that I've included today, which is about collaboration, but also about prototyping, is our collaboration with the Norwegian American artist Bjarne Melgaard. And he came to us with a very interesting task. It was about designing a house for him, a so-called house to die in. And what was really interesting in working with an artist, this kind of very close co-creation process with him. So he provided us with a lot of drawings, and he was sometimes on drugs. Sometimes, I mean, he came in here could come in late in the evening and really accommodate for a process of that kind, and also then trying to find an appropriate way of interpreting those findings and ideas, and also going into dialogue and getting more and more into the architectural sphere and using all our digital competence, all our workshop, really coming from the very, very first crazy world, a lot of sketches and not necessarily so close to a building typology. So by kind of really trying to getting closer and closer and closer, so we ended up with this very sculptural approach, very, very much tailored, of course, to this specific client. But for us, also very interesting process in using our workshop. You can see when we did the facade studies, our 3D mill, and also to find the appropriate surface treatment that is borrowed here from the Japanese sugi technique, where you burn the outer surface of the wood and then you get the entire water protection. That has been done in Japan for centuries, but we have tried it here for the first time for this project. And it was also exhibited in London, where we had this one-to-one mock-ups in combination with some arts of Bjarne Melgaard. These are some renderings. It's still, I would say, in a pending process, because what was interesting actually that this project is actually located in Oslo, close to the former atelier of our famous painter Edvard Munch. And close to this specific site is also an artist colony. We have an area in Oslo where a lot of artists are living and working together, and they were really criticizing this project and really turning into an organized opponent body, and there was a lot of media discussion. So we're actually now in dialogue with a developer in Austria. So maybe we will have to export this project. It will not be built in Norway. But okay, maybe some miracles can still happen. But it's also interesting when you deal with the different contexts you're working in, and you would expect something, a more kind of open-minded approach in the dialogue with artists, but then the opposite happens. So I will now take you back to the mountain Snøhetta. And this is a project that you might know. It's about our wild reindeer observation pavilion that was, we were commissioned by the so-called reindeer foundation, and this is directly located at the Dovre area. So we actually see in the mountain Snøhetta in the background, and that commission or task was about designing a pavilion for giving protection to be able to observe the landscape and reindeer and mosquitoes that are in these areas. So again, the contextual studies, these small I would call them installations that you see here in Norway for hunters. It's called gapahuk, and of course fireplace, and also looking into the local art work or different techniques that are typical for this part of Norway. So trying to kind of have a better understanding of, again, of the context, and then when it comes to the building typology, also borrowing from rural formats like here, and then kind of combining those two into a more softwood environment in contrast with this kind of harder outdoor shell. And we worked a lot with prototyping again for this project. This is 1:10 model, and we also handpicked the wood, so really find the best wood for this project. And then our digital model was directly transferred to the builder. So this is a workshop of the manufacturing company. And as links are very short here in Norway, it's the same company that also built some main components, the balcony fronts in the main theater room in the opera. So it was all then mounted, put on the truck, and then very easily put together. It's only about wooden connections, and nothing is glued here. So it's a really simple building, but still a lot of our values are coming together here. We call this, or at least this is one project that within the series of keyless structures. So it's open 24 hours. You can come here with your family, and you can also even stay here overnight. No one will throw you out. It's really about giving this protected frame for then observing nature. So it's not necessarily about the size of the project, it's really about conceptualizing and finding the right way to do so. And then I have included one example of our Powerhouse collaboration, and that has to do also that, especially within the last 10 years, we have an increased focus on the environmental sustainability. Of course, social sustainability is at the very heart of all of our projects, and no environmental and financial sustainability without social sustainability. But still, we have really trying to well, how can I say, challenge ourselves, but also really trying to professionalize that way of collaborating in order to be able to tackle those challenges, and also to take in the responsibility when it comes to the building sector and our role regarding when it comes to the responsibility for our environment. So in that sense, and again, referring back to this big roadmap of collaboration, these are the different formats that we are currently in when it comes to the sustainability. And Powerhouse is actually an alliance that we have founded in 2010 within partners of the building industry, where Snøhetta then is responsible for the architecture, interior and landscape part, but it's also a contractor as part of that, a client, and a lot of contributors from the research scene in Norway, university and so on. So I have included one project that is still under development, and this is the a resort project located in the north of Norway at the glacier Svart. And this is actually the first building to be built after the negative positive power standard in a northern climate. And not only does this hotel reduce its yearly energy consumption by about 85% compared to a normal hotel, but it also produces its own energy, which is an absolute must for the Powerhouse project. And I forgot to say that we, within the Powerhouse Alliance, we are committed to a very clear definition what a powerhouse is. And that means that a powerhouse has to produce more energy than is required for the building, the construction, and also for the demolition of the building, and also included the entire embodied energy of the building. So we have to compensate for any material that is used within the building, and that is calculated within the lifespan of 60 years, which also means that we have to include that we might have to shift a window after 20 years. So some components are calculated, for example, are doubled or tripled within that calculation. So for a building, as you can see in this very precious context, it was for us very important that we leave a minimal environmental footprint, and that is also reflected in the conceptual approach of our building design. And again, it was about collaboration with the client and the stakeholders. And why I have included this matrix, it's about for you better understand how a process of that kind works, because it's really about innovation. So we work with a goal and an objective, a thesis, so to say. And during this very iterative process, but still with a clear, with some clear topics and work tasks where we have to also quantify a lot of our findings, because the form finding process goes hand in hand with an energy calculation. So we have to very early understand what kind of material we are used. We have to inform our 3D model, and we have to really work with all the disciplines being present from the very beginning, because as an architect alone, you were not able to kind of deal with those ambitious sustainability goals on your own. So again, when in the conceptual phase, we just looked at don't take it too literal, but just be inspired by an animal that can both live on land and water, and to find a typology that expresses, of course, this kind of more temporary aspect, but also then being both connected with land and water within this transition zone, but then also looking into more traditional building typologies that we have along the shore, especially in northern Norway, that has to do with the fishing industry, and also the dry fish, the so-called fiskejell, as you see at the right, and also this kind of coastal typologies, so-called råby, where you have this wooden construction, seasonal house that are used by the fishermen. So all these kind of analysis then also informed our project, and also when it comes to the form finding process and the complexity, also the amount of information that is on a very early stage already inhabited in the 3D model, and also how we use the environmental measurements to inform our form finding process. Form follows environment, because also this building has to harvest energy. So it's really about calculating from the very beginning, trying to optimize it, the shape and the surface regarding where the sun comes from, and so on and so on. So it's really at a very early stage, a quite complex design process. And just to give you an idea of the expression, it's about really experiencing nature, but also then everything, the energy concept is tailored to this specific use, and also trying to get use of that when you are a tourist, that during daytime you will be outside, so you can really also tailor the energy consumption of the building accordingly. And for this project, we were able to work with our brand design department, also when it comes to the naming of the project. Svart, it means black, and svart is black glacier. So we actually worked with a specific font, the naming, and also all the other communication platforms online, color palette, and also the wayfinding system was really tailored out of this contextual approach, so to say. And also in a normal hotel, the room finding, the room program and the wayfinding system is normally based on numbers. What we try to really base is on the 360 approach as a design system, also as an orientation system. So it's about then when you have a room with a fjord view, and it's then 250-degree room. So also then the coloring of the interior, this is still, of course, very diagrammatic, but the design intent is really then that it should reflect the specific location of the room, and also then the different key cards and the different formats are designed accordingly. So for us, when working with those projects, these are actually the most interesting ones, and also when all our disciplines can work together and really have this holistic design approach to the task. And as a final project, I have included our underwater restaurant Under, and it started actually with a very brave and ambitious client who came to us and wanted us to design the first underwater restaurant in Europe. And the project itself, it's located at the south of Norway, really at the most southern part, at the very tip. And for us also working with the project and trying to, well, looking into different additional content-related aspects of it, we at a very early stage also wanted to link this up to academia. So actually we managed that this project would also function as a maritime biology center or observatory. It's like a periscope when you have this transition from water to land, but also then also allow then the university and the research uses for their studies. So you can see here it's really about this transition from land to water. And also for this project, we had all our disciplines as part of the team. So the naming and also creating this kind of unique identity was very much on top of everyone's mind from the very beginning. So these are some illustrations from the concept finding process, but this is the build result. So it's a very clear shape, but it's also about then to invite the guests into this journey coming from land and then going underwater. It's actually about, I think it's almost 8 meters above land, and then it's kind of sunking down to the sea. And again, really to increase the possibility of space, what I mentioned, the research, but also then using it as to observing underwater life. It's not only a restaurant. So this is for us really always important to increase the footprint and rather not making just serving as the purpose of a restaurant, but also exploring other synergies and possibilities. So for this project, we were actually we were commissioned with the design of all the elements. As I mentioned for you, also the naming of the project under, and actually in Norway, that's in Norwegian, that's actually quite interesting. Under means under, and it has a double meaning. Connotations mean also wonder. So it's both, it's underwater, it's a wonder, under. So we played, we played very early with these kind of double meaning of the word and the term. And you see here we also managed to design all the visual, the online formats of the project, and that includes, of course, the narratives, but also then the classic, you can book a table part, but also then it also links it to the tourism of that area. So it has, of course, become quite a magnet for a kind of more underdeveloped situation. But still, these are the projects that for us are the most interesting, where we really can have this holistic take on all the different spheres of a project. And here we were also closely working with manufacturers. We developed this acoustic fabric together with Quadrat, and also working with this color palette that also explains that you're coming from land into water, coming from having these warm shades at the very beginning, and then getting more and more the into this cold color palette. So we really developed this fabric together, and this kind of weaving. We have also one sample here at the office. And also when it comes to the building, the way of constructing the project, we also benefited a lot from the local building industry that is linked to the maritime industry in this area. All the business that had to do with oil is located in that area. So obviously this comes from very much from the maritime sector, but to have this kind of really top competence on board also when it comes to the execution was quite key to this success. So I think this was my closing slide, and I hope this was relevant also for your studies today. Thank you very much for your attention. Maybe I should stop the screen sharing. If you have some questions, let me see, stop sharing.
Thank you very much.
I'm more than happy to answer
Thank you so
any
much.
questions you might have.
Interesting lecture. We just wanted to say that. And thank you so much for obviously agreeing to do the lecture for us. We do have a question for you. It's from ED. Would you like to ask your question yourself? Or would you like us to ask it?
Don't be shy.
Would you just ask it, or would you? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, I think, if they're not.
Okay. Well, they asked, how has the work you do been affected by the pandemic, and have you developed new methods for working together as a group?
Yeah, that's a very interesting and of course quite relevant question. As you saw from our map, our studio map, we have actually a quite long tradition also prior to the pandemic of collaborating digitally or virtually, because we are also collaborating, the different studios are collaborating on different projects together. So we had already, prior to the pandemic, a quite well-established network for collaboration internally, and that we just could build onto and increase the functionality to also making it work with for the collaboration with external partners and clients. And the workshop format that you saw, that I presented to you, that is very much physical and it's happening in studio space. We also developed an online equivalent for that because, and that was also actually before the pandemic happened, because our brand design department, they were working with Wikimedia, because we work with the visual identity for all the Wikipedia platforms, and they are located, their representatives are located all over the world. And in order to have these workshops, we also had to develop an online format. And luckily enough, that was already tested, and we could immediately start to test that also for our architectural project, and it worked very well. So of course, we are lacking this kind of spontaneous situation, interactions, communication when working from home. But I think we tackled it quite well, and of course it helped us that all our clients, we were all in the same situation. We just had to deal with this, and we still have to. So I think we learned a lot also from that situation, and I think we will also benefit from the finding, even though now it's quite sad and everyone is tired and everyone just want to come together again. But still, at least here in Norway, there are quite some heavy restrictions, and they were just increased yesterday. So yes, I don't know, there was a long answer, but I think it's a mix of things. Of course, it's sad, and we are kind of, everyone is missing the colleagues, but still, I think this kind of collective DNA that we have and that we are also committed to, I think that helped us also kind of to stay together in this remote situation. And I'm sitting in the office today. We have opened a little bit, but still it's very limited. So most of my colleagues and also myself, most of the time we're working from home. Yes.
Thank you. I hope that answered. Yeah, there we go. Thank you for the answer. Adam, would you like to ask a question, or would you like us to ask it? I'm not sure. Okay, well, oh, there we go.
Is just mic okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I wondered how I'm interested by the idea of more of those powerhouses and more positive, positive housing. I was wondering if you think it's practical and economical in urban areas, or do you need some close access to a sort of very abundant source of natural energy, like flowing water or sort of 360-degree solar panel access?
No, that's a very good question, because actually the SAWSA is not a typical representative of the powerhouses. Most of them, and the one that we have already built, are in very urban context. And I think, well, we have one small Montessori school, but the 3 of them that are already built, they are office spaces, and they are all in very urban, an urban situation. I mean, within that process of investigating different sources, alternative sources of energy harvesting, actually solar energy is still the most efficient when it comes to installments and the material use and the output, the balance between in and output, because we also, of course, have to deal with the embodied energy of the PVs and all the technical equipment. So it's actually more about passive and active measures, the clear, I mean, the planning process is quite important. So the energy concept is very important, so that you have a correlation between the energy concept that you are developing, the use of the building, the occupancy, and then the area and the efficiency you have for the surfaces to harvest energy. So it's about this kind of balance of different components in the building that are coming together, and that you have to work with in order to get this into a positive energy building that is actually producing more energy after all the components that you have to compensate for first, like the entire, I mean, you can just imagine the foundations, all the concrete that is going into that. So it's really about, no, actually on the contrary, we are not depending on this kind of context that you saw for the SAWSA. It's more about that we have good solar conditions. Sometimes a tree can be difficult because it shades the building, but rather actually the more urban the better, because then you have also the transport issues that are kind of supporting the building, which is more difficult when you have a very remote location when it comes to the building site, of course, because we also have to compensate for the energy that is used in the construction period.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Should have included maybe some of those examples, but yeah, you can, if you go to our website page and Google Powerhouse, you can see the other build projects within that alliance.
Someone's just asked us, from their knowledge, a few of your projects have mixed reviews from stakeholders and people who observe the building. So do you take the criticisms and adapt to your future design?
Sorry, the acoustic was quite bad. I think I have to ask you to repeat the question, if possible. It was a kind of echo, so I can maybe turn off my mic just in the...
Okay, I'll try to read it out. Then can you hear me right now?
There you go, yeah. Just
Someone asked, from my knowledge, a few of your projects have mixed reviews from stakeholders and people who observe the buildings. Do you take this criticism and adapt your future design?
okay. Well, if they are relevant and they are, if they can kind of, if our next project can benefit from that criticism, but still, I think we always have such a clear understanding of everything we develop. It's nothing is happening by coincidence. So I think, and that's what we are striving for. It's very solid when it comes to the concept and everything that is related to it. But of course, we are also inviting opponents into our processes in order to learn also from the criticism. And if I should answer very generally, I think it would, yes, we are listening. Of course, we are in dialogue with a lot of people, but every project starts within its own conditions, and then maybe it will influence, maybe if there's something interesting, but there's not a direct logic link to it. But we are, I mean, collaboration and dialogue is key to also the way we work. So we are of course listening, but it doesn't necessarily have to influence our projects. Sometimes maybe, yeah, but.
Yes. I want to ask myself, you talked a lot about different typologies that you develop for different places, and I was wondering what informs your material choices that fit those typologies in those projects, because you have quite a range within your different projects.
Are you not thinking about the powerhouses or in general how we approach
Just in general, how do you respond?
general, yeah.
What informs your approach?
Yeah, I think again the contextual relation is very important, and also how it if the correlation between the overall conceptual approach. That's, I think you saw it very well in the ISRA, this King Abdulaziz project, where we have this kind of clear understanding of the overall massing and the expression, and then the choice of material for the facade was a kind of a consequence of that thinking and development. And for example, for the opera, the marble, that we really wanted to have this kind of white expression, and also having this link to the glacier, the nature, and also putting the most valuable material and giving it as a gift to the public, so to say. So I think it's a lot about the there has to be consistency between the concept and the material choices, but locally sourced is important. Durability, sustainability, healthy material, low maintenance. These are all aspects that kind of inform our material choices, and also our own research. Sometimes we're also testing new materials that are recycled. For example, we have some tests ongoing, but that of course requires brave clients. If you want to be the first with using a kind of a prototype material in your buildings, but yeah, it's a lot of these aspects, but it's a very interesting domain, and we have a lot of discussions always when it comes to that part. But it's not again about preferences. This really has to be it has to follow the logic of the project.
Definitely. Thank you very much for your answer. Does anyone else have any questions? I can't see any in the chat right now. Just checking. Oh, there's one from Alex. Would you like to come forward and ask it yourself?
Hi, yeah. I was just wondering, because all of your projects that you presented today seem to follow this theme of form follows environment, and so I was wondering whether, like, how your projects arise and whether you get approached to undertake specific projects that have specific needs and then apply this form follows environment approach, or do you only agree to projects that already align with these values that speak to the natural environment?
Yeah, that's also a very interesting question. I think it's a mix. I mean, we do also a lot of competitions, because a lot of our projects are also public commissions, and then it's about interpreting the brief and also then being an advocate for those values, and then interpreting a brief in correlation with our findings and analysis and concept development. This is one domain, and of course we have also a lot of private commissions, clients that are approaching us, and there it's about also starting at the very beginning, having a good dialogue and to understand what are the ambitions. Are they kind of aligned with our values? And sometimes if not, and if the project is so interesting, it's also sometimes to see if there is an openness. I mean, most of our clients who are approaching us, they have already a kind of understanding what we stand for, and they have a very conscious approach when they come to us with a project. So they have an idea why Snøhetta is the right partner for them. But then we are always challenging them. So it's more about then having this openness and this open dialogue. And also actually lately, we have really very open design processes with our clients. And that has, maybe I can expand to the pandemic and COVID related topic, because we have also to enhance the collaboration. We have this, we're using Miro. I don't know if you heard about that. That is kind of a visual platform that different colleagues can work together on one format. And we also invite our clients into these Miro spaces, virtual spaces, and then they can follow the project. We put everything there, they can comment on that. So it's really about this openness and including them into our design process. But of course, we also have clients that mainly come to us because they see a value of having our brand and the credibility that it links to it, and helping them to bring a project forward that is not so aligned with our values. And then of course we politely decline and recommend other colleagues for that. So yeah, it's a mix of things, I think. Also very long, complicated question, but it's not such an easy terrain. It's yeah, a lot of different entrances into that field, I think. And sometimes we even approach clients if we think, okay, we have a good idea, we need a good partner to bring that idea forward. So we also actively reach out to find the appropriate client for a project idea. Not so often, but sometimes. So it goes both ways.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you.
Is there any more questions for the audience? I'm just double checking. Oh, okay, if there's not any more questions, I just want to thank you yet again for coming and speaking with us and covering such a range of topics and kind of giving us such a nice insight to how you actually work. And I think it's very valuable for us to kind of really see how practices works. And this is a very inspiring talk, I'm sure, for all of us. So thank you so much. Again, there's lots of thank yous coming in the chat box as well. So.
I hope it was relevant also for your study, because that's also about collaboration, right?
Yes, definitely. Actually, we were using it as well. It was a really interesting thing.
I would encourage to use Miro. I don't have it already, but it's actually quite useful tools also when you're sitting in a remote. We have this remote distributed team. Yeah, so it's really helpful. Okay, thank you very much. And studies.
Thank you.
Safe and enjoy architecture.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.